Hey, what's going on, everybody? My name is Corey, better known as the C-Man, and I want to welcome you to another edition of the C-Man's Cinema Sit-Down. I've missed this space. I have not been home very much the last 2 weeks, and thus my general output has decreased. Work is crazy as per usual, but we've got some big stuff coming up this summer that we're kind of building to right now, so it's been a lot. Plus, I am out for a stretch. My buddy Nico gets married this weekend. So heading up to Mystic for 4 days, took off 10 overall. So I had a lot going on the last few weeks. And then on top of that, my car died in real life outside of work. Cracked the oil housing, didn't know I cracked the oil housing, drove the car without any oil because I found oil on the trunk of the car when I got to the gas station when I realized there was like a big problem. And that kind of told me like it just must have just all left, and then blew the engine out. So getting that towed and then getting a replacement engine put in. It was used, so not terrible, kind of like buying a new or buying like a used car basically. And I went from 120 or 160,000 miles on what I drive to 42. So, you know, ups and downs. I try to look at things half glass full, but it's been very, very busy, and I feel like I haven't been here because I haven't been here very much. But I'm here for a brief period of time before going down to Jersey to get my hair done, then coming back here, then heading to Mystic. Was like there's two movies I've seen in the last 2 weeks that we haven't sat down and talked about here, and I even posted my 1 minute reactions out of the theater late for both of these movies. It's been a wild run, but this one is one I wanted to talk about because I understand where both critics and audiences are coming from. And yes, I do think this movie struggles to hold your attention for the entire time, and there are slow, boring stretches. However, I do also think there is some value in this swing and to try and do a movie like this in the genre that it's in. What are we talking about? Why don't you pull up a chair, take a seat? We are getting ready to dive in, spoiler free, into In a Violent Nature. And yes, if you go to Rotten Tomatoes, you're going to see a positive score from critics who are talking about this movie like it's super artsy. And I don't think that's what's going on, but I do appreciate that writer director Chris Nash is trying to do something different inside the slasher genre, something that we haven't really seen. And to be honest, there aren't too many of those that exist anymore. Like we've seen pretty much every variation of a slasher movie you can give us. It's how well can you execute the things inside a slasher flick, and how interesting can you make the way people are taken out of a slasher flick to really find value. And then are you able to craft a legitimately good story? But we don't see a ton of new things in this genre, and for that I have to credit Chris Nash because his concept here is imagine like this is what I would imagine the pitch was. Friday the 13th, part 2. Jason, not Jason's mom. We follow him the whole movie instead of following the kids. That's what this movie is. To the point where like the character himself has a lot of Jason Voorhees vibes. And that's interesting. I've never seen a slasher from the slasher's perspective. I understand that if you want to say that the artsy elements come from that, I understand why critics are finding positives with this movie because it is an interesting take. On paper, conceptually, that's an interesting idea, and how you decide to play with that will determine if the movie is good or not. But flip it over to the audience's side, on Rotten Tomatoes at least, and at least with people I've talked, it's been pretty mixed. But it's one of those where I also understand where normal audiences are coming from because the approach, I think, is a bit of a miss. When the kills are happening, solid stuff. And to credit this movie, and I think you had to have fantastic kill sequences, they are. And there is one in particular blew me. I was overcome with joy from the slasher genre. I'd never seen anything like it. There were two that really stood out to me. There's one that's in like a lumber yard factory type place, and it's the only area in the movie where I felt the suspense because of the anticipation of something that's happening. Like the thing that's going on in that sequence is kind of drawn out, and I found that really interesting. And it was the only time I felt the like typical suspense you get in a slasher. But then there's another one. It's preceded by something to do with the lake that I thought played with that kill in an interesting way. Like it was like interesting to see this thing happen, and I was like, oh, that's cool. Kill itself, whatever. But the one that follows that one, I've never seen anything like it. And my audience was, it was a handful of people in the theater. And leaving, I was listening to people as they were getting up and they were starting to talk with their friends. And a good handful of folks did not like the movie. They found it very slow, very boring, just were not fans. However, everybody audibly and physically reacted to this one kill to the point where it was like, oh, 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 what? Like it was one of those types, and it was great. And that I think is a huge credit to the movie. Like people who didn't like your movie, you still got them at certain moments, and that's where it's anytime the kills were happening, anytime the killer is around people, because the sound design is spectacular. There's another approach that Nash has with this one that I thought was very odd, and I don't think necessarily helped the movie, but at the same time made other elements interesting. And that's this whole movie. I feel like this whole movie is give and take. Like there's something that's done that's really, really well, and then there's something that doesn't really kind of work. And there's no score in this movie. Like maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there were elements here or there, but once I started to I was like, I don't think I've heard I started to pay attention, and like the whole back half of the movie, there was nothing. It's just all Nat sound. And to that, the sound design I think is spectacular in this movie. The weight to the footsteps, how it changes as he approaches people, how he maneuvers, really, really good. When he's hearing things, the opening shot is just a stagnant, put my camera down in a set spot here, and it's all audio based. And it took a minute because I was confused. But then when I started to understand what's happening, I was like, oh, that's cool. And then there's a payoff to that on piece of information you find out later. So like there are elements in the script that have good payoffs and that work. But anytime he's around the kids, watching him move in and out and how the sound drifts and what you hear and what you don't, I thought added interesting elements to the movie. However, when those things aren't going on, it's a dude walking through the woods with a camera following him. That's the movie. Like I understand anybody who walked out of the theater bored, because this is a 90-minute movie that to me should have been between 65 and 75 minutes long. I think if you were to shorten this thing down by 20 plus minutes, it may have been able to hit a little harder, because there are artistic elements to following this dude through the woods. Like how Nash positions him in frame is the same at all times. So you're able to jump cut. And this was also something that I thought was interesting and also a little confusion. You would do these jump cuts, but the audio you're listening to, like if there's a conversation he's hearing, he's moving around the camp. The conversation is clean. There's no cuts, there's no jumps, there's no anything. But then his background will change. So like he'll be walking and it's the woods, and then, oh man, now he's behind the cabins. Oh, now he's approaching a door. And those cuts I thought were cool, and they made those stretches interesting at times. The problem is more than half the movie is this dude just walking through the woods. And if you're not hearing things and you're not seeing things, it's boring. Like I at times was, when's the next kill? Like when are we getting to somebody? And for that, I think the movie drags a little bit at 90 minutes, which is crazy because I never complain about 90-minute movies. But that is an element that does not work. I think it would have been more interesting to choose a killer that's less like Jason Voorhees and more like a serial killer, where when he's not, or someone who has a demented mind where they go back to a place and they think about things before they go execute. Like, if there were things for the killer to do in between kills, I think this movie would have worked a lot more. The fact that it's just moving through the woods or hiding behind a tree or waiting, it can drag. But to Chris Nash's credit, when things are happening, there are interesting elements. I will look at slasher movies in a different way now, because when the killer's not there, in this movie, the suspense is taken away because you see him coming. And it makes you think about the characters in a different way. Like, how the hell do you not see him coming? How do you not hear him coming? This is a huge dude, and he's literally just walking through the woods right up to you and then killing you. how? You know what I mean? Like those moments now I have a different perspective, and I credit Nash to changing my perspective in that way. And those are the things about the movie that do work. However, walking out, I think that this movie may have succeeded more with the traditional style because there is solid camera work in here, and there are times where he is observing the characters, and it's not always just hearing. Like there are times where Nash will break from that, where like the first time he gets to the camp, you're following him, you're following him to the lead up of the camp, and then all of a sudden it cuts to the campsite, and the camera's actually doing this wonderful spin where it's just kind of giving you reactions from everybody that's in the circle as one of the guys tells the backstory to this character. And I thought the lore and the backstory to the character were really, really good. Like Johnny as a character, I was interested in. Even if he was approaching the movie like Jason Voorhees, he doesn't talk, he's just a physical brute force. There are interesting elements to him, and the other actors that populate the movie, they're not, top end even for horror actors, but I thought they were interesting enough where it's like I would have been willing to spend time with these guys, and maybe you find somebody in there that is pretty decent. It's one of the things I love about horror movies is you can find young upcoming talent there, and maybe that would have been the case with some of these folks. There were a couple of them that I thought had promise, and if we would have done things traditionally and had a score and built traditional jump scares and executed all of the kills the way that they're executed here, but built the movie more traditionally, this could have been a movie that got a sequel that could have been a big win for the horror movie at like the box office this summer. Like it had the potential to do that. Taking the approach it does is not going to do those things, and it's not going to be something that audiences are going to love immediately. I think this has cult following written all over it because I think diehards of the slasher genre like myself can appreciate the things that aren't a dude walking through the woods. Like when all the other things are going on, the idea of taking out the score and trying to approach it that way. There are things that are worthwhile in here, and this is a slasher movie that's different than slasher movies I've seen in the past. And because of how it functions, I'll look at certain elements of slasher movies in a different way because we've never really seen this perspective before. That stuff's interesting. It's just more of the movie is a guy walking through a woods than a dude doing crazy things to the people. And it's not like even torture-esque. Like he's not trying to build terror or suspense. Like he just picks these people off, and then you're at the end of the movie, and that is the part of the film I had an actual issue with. Something changes in the last 10 minutes, and I was expecting a payoff to that change that never comes. And because there was no payoff to that change, the change in and of itself made no sense. You could have cut the last 10 minutes off of this movie for me, and you would have been down to 84 minutes immediately. Subtract your credits, and you're pushing like 80 minutes. Not even. You're probably like 82. But like you could have gotten this down to like 70 minutes, and I think it would have been tight and it would have been effective. At the 90-minute runtime, I understand where audiences are coming from, but I think as a diehard slasher fan, if you live in that space like I do, there's value here, and I think this could develop a cult following. Like this is one, when it gets to streaming, I'm definitely going to take another look at. But no, it's a guy walking through woods more often than not. And shout out to Barrett, who plays Johnny. I thought he really embodied the character quite well, and I really enjoyed the character design. Like you understand that he is Jason, like right from get go, because the mask, the old school fire mask, like fire department mask, was cool and worked from a visual, and how he functions, his main method of killing, all that stuff was dope. But he doesn't have that mask on the whole time. So when you're following him, there are like chunks of his like skin missing on his head and like on his arms and stuff. And you're just like, I am fascinated more about this character now. And then when we finally see him up front, I was like, oh, okay, that's terrifying. And like in a movie without the mask, that could have really, really worked. But we got what we got. So let's get the Sea Maniacs up. Like I said, I think had you gone a more traditional route in telling this one, the cast could have possibly really popped. I think there are people who do make an impact and do have moments where you're like, I would have enjoyed spending a movie with this group, I think. Rye Barrett, though, does an excellent job embodying this huge entity of a man. And how he approaches and how he executes, I thought really worked. The physicality of the character was awesome. The camera work, excellent. I really do think that Chris Nash and his team shoot and make a well-made movie. Like, the cinematography is solid. I liked how we followed him. I liked that he was in the same place, so you could do these jump cuts where just like everything but him seems to change. That stuff worked really well. The sound design is excellent. Like, when you're hearing conversations as he moves away, what you're hearing, how much you're hearing, putting you in the shoes of the killer, I thought all of that stuff worked. The sounds of the forest, how heavy his steps can be or not be, how you manage all that stuff, I thought worked really, really well. The execution of all those things was great. Odd not to have any kind of a score, but in this different kind of take, another thing worth exploring. Maybe not the best decision, but interesting nonetheless. The kills, top end. Specifically one. There's one that's like top end. Like, you could put that probably in a top 25, top 10. I've never seen anything like it. And the other ones either hit you in a way where you were like, cool, it added something that you were missing. The lumberyard sequence gives you a little bit of that suspension that we haven't had because we always see the kill coming. But that one I thought worked. Some of the other ones just gave interesting elements about the character, so I was cool with all that stuff. It's just half this movie, if not more, is a dude walking through the woods, and that makes a 90-minute movie drag. The pacing is the one thing that does not work in this movie, and it is one of those where I think if you had this at 70 minutes, it could have popped, where people would be like, hey, that was an interesting take. I appreciate what we did. Had you changed the killer a little bit, made him less Jason Voorhees and maybe more Freddy Krueger, or more like just a dude that was killing people, you could have added things of him going and prepping or planning things, but this is just a force moving through the woods, and at times it struggles. But I don't know. For me, I love all flavors of horror and all flavors of the slasher genre in particular, because that's the one that really made me love this genre. And as long as you can give me something I haven't seen before, which this movie does, and you can create something that I like, that's interesting from a concept standpoint in a genre that is so paint by numbers sometimes, I have to give credit to Chris Nash for stepping out and trying things. I think maybe some more conversation should have been made or had about, hey, how do we make the in-between moments a little less a dude walking through the woods? But I don't know. I appreciate the take. I appreciate the try. There are things that work. There's certainly stuff that doesn't. I'm kind of dead middle on this one. 2.5 out of 5 C-Maniacs for the C-Man. Now I flip it over to you. Where do you land in the horror world? How big of a slasher fan are you? And do you think conceptually the idea of the movie following the slasher is interesting and worthwhile? And if you've seen the movie, what elements of that take work and what don't? And if you haven't seen the movie, was this on your list? Have we made you more or less excited about the movie? And is this something you think you could appreciate for what it is? I think mainstream audiences will not. I saw that firsthand myself with my audience, but I think in seeing what some critics have said and what some, people who talk about movies that don't land in like the regular critic sphere for me, there are things in there that I think slasher fans will enjoy and take away from this one. So if that is intriguing to you, let me know. And if it's not, let me know. Anything you got, good, bad, indifferent on In a Violent Nature, put it down below in the comments section. Look forward to talking to you down there. As always, if you enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up. And if you're new, you want to come hang out with C-Man anytime. We're talking movies, TV, trailer, reactions. I saw some bad boys do some things, and I got some fun stuff to talk about there. Obviously, Star Wars is going on, so if you're interested in The Acolyte, we're doing full reactions and reviews there. Just regular movies, trailers, anything you got. If you're digging the vibe, you want to show a little love and support, come join C-Maniac Nations, where all those things happen. You can do it simply by jumping over there, hitting that subscribe button, hit that little bell if you want those alerts. And until next time, for the C-Man's Cinema Sit Down, I've been the C-Man. I'm signing off. Peace. Hey, what's up, C-Maniac Nation? Winter Ken here, where we grow out our roots and our beard, letting you know that you can see some new C-Man videos right up here and right down here. And if you want all those videos and show that man a little love and support, come join C-Maniac Nation right over there, and the C-Man will catch you on the next one.